bit closer, maybe it'll feel like the room's a little fuller, but I feel it's the presence of the Lord here already today, don't you? And that's what we're here for, is to be with Him and be with one another. I don't know if this will interest you or not, but I read this dateline, February 12th, 2015, just this week. Researchers at SETI, who knows what SETI is? S-E-T-I. Nobody knows what SETI is? My goodness, you people are out of touch. You know what it is?
Yeah.
What is it?
It runs on your computer.
Oh, okay, well that's a different SETI. There's probably lots of SETIs. This particular SETI is a scientific team called the Search for Extraterrestrial Life Institute. Yeah, and they're a real organization, and they've been in business for 30 years. For 30 years, they have been listening to outer space using radio telescope facilities in the U.S. So far, there's been no sign of E.T. You know what E.T. is, right? Okay. E.T. go home. How many remember that? Okay, there's a few. I'm starting to date myself a little bit. The organization's director, Dr. Seth Shostak, told attendees at some conference that it was now time to step up the search. Some of us at the Institute are interested in what's called active SETI, not just listening, but actually broadcasting something to nearby stars, because maybe there is some chance that if you wake somebody up, you'll get a response. This was a story that was published by BBC News. This is not some wacko, sci-fi nerdy outfit that's reporting this. This is the BBC, British Broadcasting Company. They're kind of the standard of the international news. So, assuming this is not their report, this is my part. Assuming that there was life on another planet, or another piece of some space real estate, dust or comet or asteroid or something. Because who are we to say that it has to start on a planet, right? If there is life out there. Let's just assume that there is life out there for a second, and that they're somehow able to hear our transmission, that they're able to decipher it and actually make sense out of our transmission, and to locate its origin, which would be our planet Earth. Under the best case scenario, what would we be hoping to accomplish? Would we, first of all, prove that there is indeed life in outer space? And science has been focused on doing that for a long time. They've spent a lot of your tax dollars trying to do that and to prove that. So far, they haven't found the first molecule of life, but they're still looking. Okay, let's say we proved that there was life out there, and then somehow we were able to lure this species to the Earth. What would we hope that they could do for us? If they're smart enough to be able to travel across galactic space, then maybe they could help us to cure diseases. Maybe they could help us to end poverty in the world. Maybe they could help us bring balance and equality to the Earth, and help us redistribute all the wealth and resources of the Earth equitably, and bring an end to war and political strife. And since we would suddenly realize that we're all in the same cosmic boat, what I would call the Star Trek effect. That they maybe could teach us about our origins, where we came from, and perhaps our destiny, where we're going. Now remember, this is the best case scenario. And then maybe they could help us do all of this. But what if instead of doing all those things, those on the receiving end of our intergalactic phone call decided that we sound tasty? That maybe they would make a trip across the galaxy to come and eat us, like anteaters destroying an anthill. Or they would ravage our ecosystem and leave us in an uninhabitable world, assuming that any of us survive. There have been a lot of movies like this, if you haven't noticed. Maybe a reasonable person would have to say that there's about an equal opportunity that either one of these two scenarios might take place. Or maybe they would come here with good intentions, but bring with them the space equivalent of the bubonic plague that would end up wiping out the entire human race. That tends to happen when two isolated groups of people suddenly come together. They swap not just food and language and culture, but diseases too. Now, the real serious question, having said all of that, is, for me, why do our scientists have this preoccupation with finding life outside of our earthly biological envelope, which is really just about 50 miles thick around this planet? Think about that. All the life that we know about in the world, in the universe, exists in an envelope about 50 miles thick. And that's probably being a little generous, if the truth be known. The Himalayas are about, 7 miles high? And the deepest oceans are about 7 miles deep. So maybe it's more like 14 inches, but you got air and space above that. So there's some additional room to operate for life. But that's not a very big envelope of life-sustaining environment, is it? And that's all we have, that's all we know about. Where life has existed, anywhere we've existed, it's all that existed in that one confined space. But let's say somehow we find that life outside the biological envelope. That would be one reason that scientists would be so interested in finding extraterrestrial life, whether it's intelligent or not. But maybe an even more pressing question for us today is, why are we spending hundreds of billions of dollars on projects intended to answer a question that was answered for us at least 3,500 years ago? The fact of the matter is that we know, we have evidence right here, that there is life that has existed forever outside, not just of our little envelope of life, but outside of the bounds of time itself. Life that has always existed and life that always will exist even beyond the end of this universe as we know it. Life, that same life, has offered to do for us everything that I mentioned to you in what I call the best case scenario. He has offered to, well, let's go back and see, to cure diseases. He's offered to end poverty. He's offered to bring balance and equality to the earth. He's offered to help us redistribute our wealth and resources equitably. He's offered to bring an end to war and political strife. And he has offered to teach us, in fact, he has told us that he is our origin. And he is our destiny. Why are we looking out in space for evidence of something that we already have? We already have the evidence that all this existed and has existed forever. Well, in much the same way as the SETI radio disc, it is actually a huge hole in the ground, looks like your satellite dish on your house, sort of. And it's got this massive array of equipment that's suspended above it, and it's listening out into deep space every night, especially at night, because the sun's rays interfere with radio waves. But they still haven't heard anything. But for what they've been listening for all that time, we already have the answer. In much the same way as that radio disc, that listening disc, is looking into space for something that we have right here, essentially it's tuned to the wrong channel. It's got this huge radio dish, but it's tuned to the wrong channel. You might say it's pointed in the wrong direction. How many have ever used one of these big TV antennas, that has all the different wires hanging off of it, and you have to turn it just a certain direction, don't you, if you want to pick up the TV stations nearby? We had one of these hanging underneath the deck of the parsonage when we moved here, and it was hooked up, and we had a cable that ran into the house, and we didn't use it because we had cable and satellite, and then cable again, and then satellite again. We switched whenever the prices changed. But
and if the weather was bad, you didn't.
Sure, a lot of interference, isn't there, at times? there's a good analogy there that we'll refer to some extent today. But just like that radio dish is listening in the wrong direction, it's tuned to the wrong channel, a lot of people, a lot of humans, have spent their entire lives with their own radio receiver, you might say, their spiritual antenna pointed in the wrong direction. You see, God has spoken and has been speaking to the human race, like I said, for over 3,500 years. But if our antenna is pointed in the wrong direction, or if we're tuned to the wrong frequency when it comes to spiritual matters, then all we hear is just white noise, that sound that you get, isn't that a lovely thing? When you tune your radio to the wrong channel, you just get that white noise. Or if you turn your TV to the wrong channel, all you get is snow, that same sound. And a lot of people are living their lives with their antenna turned in the wrong direction. And so all they're getting, spiritually speaking, is just white noise and snow. They're not receiving the message because they're not tuned to the right direction. Now, what does all that have to do with our message today or our scripture today? Glad you asked. When the writer of Hebrews wrote what he did at the beginning of these first 2 chapters of his letter, he was most likely writing to a group of people who knew what the channel frequency was. He was writing to, in fact, they knew the call letters of the station he was talking about. They knew the names of the news anchors and the weather forecasters on that channel by heart. And they knew that it could be trusted. It was a trustworthy source. They were familiar with the format of the news show. They knew when the weather was going to come on so they could turn the TV to that channel just at the right time to get the weather and not have to listen to the sports like my wife does. And she knows. She knows exactly when to tune it to Channel 13 and get it off my favorite station, which we won't talk about.
Works for me.
Just to get the weather. But so they were familiar. They knew just what the writer of Hebrews was referring to when he talked to them about God who has spoken to them long ago through their fathers. He calls them our fathers. So when he speaks, when he's writing, he is identifying himself with the group of people that he's writing to. He's part of it. He's talking to his own people, you might say. He's writing a letter, you might say, home to his family members. And he's identifying himself as one of the Hebrews to whom this letter was written. And it's interesting that he uses the word Hebrews and not Jews. See, the Jews were the last remnants of the Hebrew race in its pure form. The Jews were the ones that had been taken out of their country in exile because of disobedience to God, and then later returned to their homeland where the temple was rebuilt, and they returned to their worship of God, who called them into existence, you might say, through Abraham and Sarah, when they were well beyond the age of childbearing. But the Jews were just one of 12 tribes. So when the writer is writing to the Hebrews, he's writing to the entire nation, the entire family that has at this time been scattered around the world through various invasions and dispersions of the race. But he identifies himself with them. He gets right to the point, though, after he identifies with the people and he talks about our fathers through whom God has spoken. He gets right to the point. You see, the papyrus that he used was kind of scarce. It was a valuable material. There wasn't a whole bunch of extra papyrus lying around. You didn't go to Staples and buy more papyrus when you ran out in that day. It was just hard to come by. So they had to make the most of it. So he got right to the point once he had established that he's writing to his own people and he's talking about this God that they know through their history and tradition. They know who he is, and they know how he has spoken to them. And he gets right to the point. And he says, he uses the background of their mutual relationship as sort of a launching pad for his discussion. And he assumes certain things. He assumes that the people he's writing to know who God is. He assumes that they share a common ancestry. He assumes that they know who the prophets were that he's talking about, that God spoke through. And he assumes that they accept these prophets as trustworthy spokespeople for God. Those four assumptions he is basing the rest of his letter on. And from there he jumps quickly to the subject of the matter, which is Jesus, and who he is, and what he accomplished for us. He talks first of all about who Jesus is.